Good afternoon and welcome to the Insurance Post Live 2021 technology event and the second tech talk of the day, sponsored by CoreLogic, called The Next Tech Wave for Insurers, where we'll be pinpointing the new solutions revolutionising the UK insurance sector. My name is Jonathan Swift, the Content Director of Insurance Post, and I'm delighted to say, joining me this afternoon for the discussion, we have Angela Moran from RSA, Stephen Petresky from Aon, Michael Porter from CoreLogic, and James Tucker from Allianz. Welcome, everybody.
Hello.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Now, this is an interactive session, so we want you, the viewers, to get involved, and you can do this at any point by using the tab on your screen to ask a question, and we'll come to these later on. My first question, I'll come to you, James, first of all. Can I ask you, what technologies are on your radar as potentially the most transformative in terms of reshaping the insurance industry in perhaps both the near term and then further into the future?
Well, I think at the moment, front of mind is what's happening as we work through the pandemic. It's interesting for us to see firsthand how we need to change what we do and how we operate by using new technologies. We've experimented with a whole load of new ways of working. And we've actually realized that working from home, working remotely, can be very, very effective. We've got new collaboration tools that are working really well. We're in many ways more productive. I mean, of course, we're wasting a lot less time because we're not traveling all over the place. And we've realized that we can serve our customers really well, even with many staff working from home. So that's my first observation. I think that's a really near-time observation as well.
Angela?
Yeah, well, firstly, I completely agree with what was just said there, but also from the customer perspective in regards to the pandemic, we've obviously seen a huge shift in terms of how they're been behaving. So that obviously has to have an impact in terms of what we look to do as insurers. There's a lot in terms of the digitisation, making sure that they're able to self-serve more. They're obviously not driving their cars as much. There's impact in terms of the motor side. People are working from home a lot more, so that's impacting on small businesses who perhaps rely on trade from those particular workers. So I think there's a huge amount of impact there as well. So we have to be able to be more flexible. So I think that's something we're looking at in terms of how we set ourselves up to be more flexible. So cloud, for example, cloud-first strategy, I think that's becoming more prevalent across the industry. So that's probably my main observation.
Michael.
Thanks, Jonathan. Hello, everyone. So I think, just following on from what the guys have said, what we've observed is really I'll kind of split it into three phases. The first phase was the immediate kind of rush to be able to service customers in the initial part of the pandemic, if that's what we're focusing on for the initial part of the discussion. I think insurers probably surprised themselves quite quickly in terms of how quickly they could adapt to a remote working solution and to leverage technology that perhaps they already had in their business in different areas and were able to then move and lift and shift into different parts of the operation. And we saw some incredible speed to market, speed to action in terms of our insurance customers, and really impressive. That was kind of phase one, which is how do we operate. Phase two is then how does this impact our business? So we're not an insurance company, but we service them all over the world. And how do those insurance businesses present or prepare themselves for the future? So there's a lot of internal review, shifting, as Angela said, towards a cloud solution, cloud strategy. It's informed a kind of strategic review of how these businesses operate, how they service customers, how customers expect to be interacting with them. And then I think what's happening now is those strategic reviews are resulting in action. So we're only a year out, or just over a year out, and the impact of the reviews and the oh my goodness moments at the very early part of the pandemic have now resulted in a real step change in thought, I would say, within insurance companies. They've surprised themselves to an extent in terms of what's possible, possible in terms of technological change, what technology is available to them, and how they can adapt to it and to their customers' expectations. So I'm really excited being in an insurance technology business about the opportunities and the changes that we're starting to see now and probably will do for the next few years.
Stephen.
So a couple of things to add there. So first is, I think the as we enter the next phase of how we work in, at Aon, we're calling it the new better in terms of the way of working, where we have these hybrid models, which are not only about how we work effectively remotely, but how we best utilize our time in the office together, how we best utilize our time visiting and spending time with clients, and this hybrid model that will evolve. So I'm very excited about how we blend technology and some of the traditional ways of business together in order to create a new better. But in terms of where we've seen a really great technology shift as a result of the pandemic is our business segments that have fully enabled digital client journeys. So if you think about not only people collaborating together remotely, but what is that journey that's digitally enabled that allows a multi-channel experience that leverages technology to complete a customer journey and optimize the operation behind it? What we saw in the pandemic is strong results in our businesses where we team together and work together through remote collaboration. But our digitally enabled businesses actually had outperformed our expectations from a growth perspective. So if anything, through the pandemic, what has been proven is digitally enabled business models are a very significant shift for the future and are great sources of growth.
So can I ask you, Angela, I mean, how would you describe digitalization in insurance? And is there any danger we've reached technological innovation stagnation, or is today's adoption of the new more centered on better utilization of existing technologies?
I don't think we'll ever reach stagnation in anything. I mean, I think just us as human beings, we're constantly looking for the next thing, aren't we? Always about progress. But I think personally, from my experiences so far, I think there is a need to look at existing technologies. I mean, I think insurance are not alone in having quite a lot of legacy. Legacy is quite often seen as a bad thing, but sometimes, it can do the job. So I think it's probably a bit of a balancing act to be had in terms of what your strategy is going to be. Digital obviously is so important, becoming ever more so important. Digital drives everything these days, and it's going to continue to do so. But I think there's probably, I don't want to, there's a question later that I think touches on this, so I don't want to go into too much detail here, actually. I'll probably save it for later. But what I would say is my thinking is that we need to have a better balance of understanding how we can utilise what we've already got, because we've already got such complex IT landscapes as it is.
Michael.
Thanks. I think the way that I tend to think about these things is, first of all, the answer is no, we haven't reached stagnation. How would I describe digitalization in insurance, I think, is the first question. Kind of split that into two, really. So the first one is, the digitization of an existing insurance business. So whether that's underwriting, policy, quote and buy, claims management, there's lots of solutions out there that are breaking that value chain up and trying to create really good point solutions to make improvements in that, as well as some broader platforms to create a better overall digital process and customer experience, etc. And the second one is digitization of the business model itself. So, startup insurance providers or insurers building businesses within their own groups, which are underpinned by technology. So it's not that they're trying to adapt their existing business to the technology. If anything, they're actually building businesses on the technology stack so that they can create differentiation. So I think, those are the two major ways that we think about insurance digitization, whether that's, things like parametric insurance, whether it's buying insurance in more niche ways, or whether it's embedded insurance, all these interesting new kind of business models that tend to pop up as startups, maybe get acquired, maybe scale themselves, whatever. That's where we're seeing the two differences. On your second question around stagnation, no, I don't think we've reached the limit, far from it. But we have seen, as I said earlier, insurers picking up existing technology solutions and lifting and shifting them, primarily driven by the speed of deployment. If I've already got whether it's a procurement process to actually buy and select a particular technology type for a problem that I'm trying to solve. If I've already got that somewhere else, then I'm not going to go through that loop again. I'm going to pick that up, dust it off, maybe tweak it a little bit, and then use it in a different place. So I think that's happened a lot over the last year, but I think, a great example would be video technology. We might have been using that in a business-to-business context extensively, but perhaps we haven't done it in FNOL, or perhaps we haven't done it in the triage of a claim, whereas that's now really expanding out. And I think the next phase, as I said earlier, would be to really look at deploying these things in a more broad and strategic context. So it's moving quickly, far quicker than it has in the past, as a result of what's going on, really.
Stephen.
So in terms of digitization in insurance, I think we're at a great point in the journey, because the model is now proven and accepted. So if you look back a year, 2 years ago, you had several new entrants into the space that, was kind of pure insurtechs, where there was, much talked about loss ratios and combined ratios being something that wasn't sustainable, cost of customer acquisition being something that, was unsustainable and operating at a loss. What we've seen through new entrants and also incumbent providers that have truly adopted these digital models is that the numbers work really well. So we've proved it works. We've proved that the model is sustainable. So now what you're seeing is people entering with the intent to truly migrate significant books of business or to create new books of business on these digital platforms, rather than experimenting or taking risk to see if the model works, right? So the technology risk is long behind us with the maturity of the analytics, the cloud technology, the amount of developers and technology awareness around the world. I think recently the business model risk or the market risk that's associated with these models, has been proven. So now you're seeing, capital with the intent to truly deploy at scale coming into the space. So far from stagnation, I think we're at the time of really a great period of growth in digital in our industry.
And finally on this question, James.
Yes, I agree with all of the other panelists on this one. Find no idea is really new, so what we see is more and more evolutions of existing technologies, but no way are we stagnating. We're just getting started. There's new technologies, data science, how we're using IoT, the whole question of how we use renewables and how we incorporate that into our businesses. Everywhere you look, there's new technologies and new ways to use them. And we're just getting started. We're running multiple projects at the moment, and I'd say we are at the beginning of some really exciting new changes in insurance.
So to all of your point there, the fact that we obviously haven't reached saturation and nowhere near saturation, and there's still a lot of evolution to go. Can I ask, and I'll come to you first of all, Michael, how do you keep track of the changes that are going on in both the technology and then associated with the insurance industry?
Well, it's kind of our day job, right? So we're with being a data and technology company, like we have to both, for us to exist and differentiate ourselves, we have to be at the forefront of what's going on, whether that's within our own stable from a build perspective, or whether it's through integration with kind of leading partnerships, or even, potentially in the acquisition space, perhaps. We have to see what trends are spiking, what's going on. But I think there's a big thing there around, there's lots of great ideas, and I think there's a question later about, the marketplace for service providers in technology. I mean, my background is in claims, and there's a huge volume of great ideas out there, some of which have been turned into technology solutions, some of which have actually started to deliver value. And I think the trick is finding out which of the things that you see out there actually have the ability to really move the needle for an insurer, whether it's for me in claims, whether it's an expense or indemnity control or consumer journey or whatever. I think, there are lots of great ideas, but until they're proven out in an actual business context, it's quite difficult to spot the gems. So, we spend a lot of time working on that stuff. We have R&D planning, plus 5 years out. And and a huge amount of investment goes into our product development and roadmaps to make sure that where value can be created, we're there able to bring that to our insurer clients.
Stephen.
So staying on top of technology trends, innovative ideas, it is something that we are very deliberate about. It also takes hard work. It takes people that are dedicated to it. And it also takes a process and a framework that we leverage to do in a coordinated way, because of the size of our firm really requires that we have a structured approach around it. So we start with really focusing on our relationship management capability, which we think about as how we engage with the emerging technology community, whether it's through incubators, the venture capital firms that sponsor these companies, different events where we're seeing lots of emerging companies and we're present there. We are engaged there. And we also do all the things on our side of the relationship to make it easier to work with. So when we're working with a 5 to 10 person company that may have some exciting technology that a 2,000 question security audit questionnaire is probably not appropriate. So how do we manage the risks for our firms while making it easier for them to work with us? And we've developed processes around that. The second piece of it is making sure our team that is doing that engagement is truly in touch with the strategies and the strategic initiatives around our business. That allows us to speak to that emerging technology community about what matters to us most in an effective way. Also, it connects them with actionable opportunities within our firm. They're not just science experiments. There's nothing worse a company of our size can do to a small company than have them waste their time, right? So we make sure that the opportunities we engage in are actionable and have an outcome. Otherwise, we're very transparent in saying, look, we like what you're doing, but not now for us. We're just not ready. And sometimes that honesty is the best thing that we can do. And lastly, with this engagement and this link to strategy, we're also very deliberate about how we track the success around these initiatives. So whether they're commercial partnerships, whether they're technology that we're using to improve a process, we have a formal set of mechanisms in place to track the financial return and success around these initiatives. So it's really bringing those three things together that has held the sponsorship and really the attention of the firm to delivering value for emerging technology.
James.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like the other guys are saying, we have to understand the tech background and the tech environment. That's really important. And, we can do that through running proofs of concept, speaking to suppliers, partners, running InsurTech events, etc. But our aim is not to become tech experts and amaze people with our tech knowledge. Our aim is to understand customer needs and customer problems and really, really dig into those and understand them in depth. And it's more important, I think, to understand the customer problem than it is to understand the details of the technology. And then we're in a good position to do something really transformational and change those problems and bring something new and exciting to market. So that's how we see things.
Finally, Angela.
Yeah, thank you. Well, of course, events like this are great ways of finding out what else is going on around the place. But I echo a lot of what the other gents have said. We very much want to focus in terms of what's the outcome that we're looking for. Obviously, RSA is a pretty well-known brand, so I'm not short of people wanting to talk to me, telling me about their shiny new toy. So for me, it has to be about, well, how does that align to what we're trying to achieve? We've got a roadmap that goes out for a few years. How does it align to that? And that's the same for any of the team. And if anything does look promising, that's something that we would then look at collectively internally to see, what can we do with this? But it needs to start with what's the outcome and does it meet with what we're trying to achieve? That has to be first and foremost why you look at anything else, because otherwise you can fall into the trap of getting very overexcited about something because it sounds brilliant, but actually, if it's not going to deliver what you need, then it's not very worthwhile.
So to Angela's point about shiny new toys and people with shiny new toys, How would you assess the UK solution provider market? I mean, is it saturated providers? Is there a danger that you're missing out on things because there are so many people trying to sell you their shiny new toys? I'll come to you on this first of all, Stephen.
So I think I think the days of startups coming and just having great technology or a big idea, maybe that was a generation ago. The companies that we're engaging with, even at the earliest stages, because of just the knowledge around what these companies can do and the impact they can have, are coming with better talent, more experienced talent, better knowledge of the industry and how they can make an impact to our business. The meetings that I have now, I'm always impressed by the level of preparedness of the companies in understanding my business, understanding my clients and what their technology or business can do to impact with us. So, it's kind of interesting to, maybe it's a bit of an oxymoron to see a maturity in the startups, but even though they're very small businesses and emerging and growing fast, their maturity and knowledge of the industry and how to engage is, I wish we always prepared as well, and we always knew much about how we engage, as many of these companies do when they engage with us. I've been incredibly impressed.
James.
Yeah, I really feel that the insurtech world has matured since we've been involved with it anyway. It's different now, and the way we engage with providers is different as well. There's much more of a partnership, and less of proposing something new and exciting, which perhaps might have been the way we looked at this before. In terms of Allianz, obviously, is a big global company, and I think we have a good reach into insurtechs. We don't just look at the UK market, but we can speak to our colleagues doing similar things in other entities right across the world, because whatever we're doing, we're probably not the first, and we're definitely not the first to have thought about it. So we can interact with our colleagues in different countries, and generally speaking, we can get a good feel for who are the possible providers. And then a lot of the guys we work with, they're based all over the world, completely open to working with anybody, providing they can provide the service.
Angela.
Yes, it's similar. Again, we very much focus on strategic partnerships, so we're quite conscious not to go too quickly into new relationships. I think nowadays it's very much about working with a few select key suppliers that we want to build really strong, lasting relationships with, as opposed to lots of smaller collaborations. So that tends to be how we look at it, and whether or not we can work together throughout a longer period of time. So fewer conversations about shiny new toys, but I still get the odd ones here and there, and completely agree in terms of everyone is much more prepared now. In fact, I'm sometimes shocked by how much they seem to know about what our plans are internally, even before I seem to really have got to grips with them. So in terms of preparedness, I would definitely agree with the gents on that one.
So Michael, coming at it from a different angle. I thought you might have put me last year as the only solution provider. Yeah, it's interesting, the observations. Actually, I think the insurtech boom, if you want to call it, and I suppose it's been going a while now, as it presents risks and opportunities for insurance companies. It seems that it's funny because we don't get this kind of honest feedback often. We don't get the kind of dialogue with an insurance carrier after the fact. Once you've had the conversation in the meeting, you're either into a process or you're not, and that's great. I think our job is to present the best solution we can, and I think when we look at the options out there, I think we're a bit of an anomaly, because we've been in the insurtech space. I've been doing this for 13 years, and so it's not the boom. This is established technology, but at the same time, you still got to be showing innovation. You still got to be delivering value. So I think being prepared is kind of the minimum that we would expect of ourselves, to understand the problems we're trying to solve. I think what we're always conscious of is, and I say this to my teams, and I've also adapted this myself, is the amount of effort that goes into an insurance carrier just to evaluate a section of the market on a particular type of value proposition is huge and involves a massive amount of resource commitment. And so we have to be really respectful of that, because, you know, if you do have to do an RFI or an RFP, or if you have to do a response in a particular way, you've got to do it exactly as it's asked for, on time, in the way that it's asked for, to save people a waste of energy. Just as, you know, it's a great observation earlier to say that, you know, you don't want to waste people's time. It's both ways. But, you know, we've got to make sure the trick of really good engagement is getting to the point where you understand whether there is an opportunity to work together or not as fast as possible. And I think the more that we can all do that, solution provider side, carrier side, we'd be more effective across the industry. So it's good to hear that. Actually, it's very valuable to hear the observations from the other panelists.
So, I mean, taking all that on board, and I'll come to you first of all on this, James. I mean, how do you think the future insurer solution provider relationship will look like? I mean, do you think there's a possibility that insurers will move this digital innovation always in-house? Will they buy that capability in-house, or do you think as an insurance company, you will continue to rely on third parties that are out there?
So I think the relationship we will have has matured a bit as well. If I think about the earlier innovation partners we might have had, let's say, 5 years ago, perhaps there was a bit of paranoia on both sides of people stealing ideas and so on, and then you realise actually that's not always justified. So maybe now it's become a bit more open, a bit more trusting. I think in-house is probably too expensive to do that all the time, and also you're limiting your ideas. It's like you're a little bit blink because you're always thinking about things from the inside of your own company. So why not let the market find the best innovations? And lots of insurers, we've seen this, there's been a move from perhaps involving in-house or perhaps even incubators, but early stage, but waiting to the startups hit a certain maturity and then engaging with them. So that's been a shift that we've seen. And the final point to make would be that it's really important not to waste time, to what people have said already. And to that end, what you can do is, if you're thinking about running a proof of concept, you can almost do a pre-proof of concept. So you just do a really quick pre-POC where you are just trying to prove the very basic things. Does it work? Can you plug it in? Is it easy to install? Whatever it might be, before you go sort of too much in depth. And that's a strategy I found quite successful for avoiding, you know, wasting time too much.
Angela.
Yeah, completely agree. I think solution providers aren't going to go anywhere. I think that they provide expertise that don't necessarily make sense to have in-house, besides the cost element and the lack of flexibility that might give you. It just doesn't make sense, really. You need to have a team that's capable of providing the the talent, the skill set, the capabilities that you need longer term. But where you need something for maybe a finite period, it wouldn't make sense to bring that in-house. And to the other points raised, you know, solution providers are going across different organisations, across industries perhaps, so they'll have other insights that we might not have, because you are in your own bubble in many respects until you come up to events like these, or you do some reading and things. But I think you can very quickly get in kind of insular, looking at what you're doing and not look at the wider picture. And I think sometimes solution providers can provide that broader perspective that you might not be looking at internally. But yeah, I agree with everything said there.
Michael.
Thanks. I think I thought of something when I was thinking about this question, is that, you know, Kodak didn't invent the digital camera, and that, you know, the people who disrupt industries don't typically come from within them. And I think so that, you know, and not that all innovation is disruptive, but at the same time, what that means is that, you know, there is a necessity to have innovation within a software or technology business, because if you don't have that innovation, you're not going to compete, you're not going to win. So that necessity drives the energy that goes into these things, in my experience. I think insurance companies are going to have two things that they need to do themselves that are going to become more and more focused as new entrants come into the market, and some of the business models that we talked about at the very beginning become or grow faster, become proven out. As Stephen said, we're at the beginning of that now. That's going to speed up. So more traditional insurers getting hold of their data and understanding its value and being able to really use that data to protect their market positions is going to become a real focus area. So when you're architecting technology solutions, the insurers really need to own that. They need to know where their data is, how it can be leveraged, that it's structured, that it can be leveraged into AI solutions and things like that. And that's going to become their kind of core, I think, because a lot of the new entrants into insurance are going to come from data businesses that want to sell insurance, not insurance businesses that try and control data. So I think insurers will focus quite a lot on that. The technology innovation for things like point solutions or consumer-facing experiences and things like that will come from outside. And then there's the third bit, which is the skill set around plugging it all together and actually making a unified journey for a user happen across all these different technologies. And that's something that we'll probably talk about a little later, but there are ecosystems and how they can be leveraged to create that single data model for the insurance companies to really control and understand their value and their differentiation. So innovations will not, there's no monopoly on it. It's not going to just stay with third parties. And quite often the ideas come from the insurance companies. The execution comes outside. That's what tends to happen. And then it's brought back in again through, whatever relationship ends up being the case. But I think that data focus for carriers is going to take up a lot of their time. So, trying to build, a lot of software is probably something that's going to stay outside of the business. But I'm not an insurance company, so I may be off the mark there.
Stephen.
Sure, thank you. So when I think about solution providers, let's talk about them in kind of three categories, right? So I think there is the small and the new, or pardon me, the smaller, the emerging, which we talked about. And I think, the days of working with an emerging company or a startup to do something very significant, meaningful, important in your business is, that's just going to become normal, right? And it's becoming more and more normal, and we see more and more of that. And companies are going to get better at engaging with them, and more corporate venture capital, more corporate business development groups engaging with that community. So we're going to see a lot more of that, and that's just going to continue. Second is, if I think about large providers, it's been an interesting life cycle. So if I look back several years, that was the source for innovation. And I think a lot of the large service providers actually became complacent or maybe overconfident in their ability to just be the de facto provider for technology and innovation for many of their clients. And that's when you saw this emergence of these, startup companies really coming in and starting to win mind share. I've seen a significant shift in that over the past year, 2 years, maybe even a bit longer, where large solution providers realize they need to be highly innovative, bringing more solutions, being open-minded, thinking, beyond their products and thinking about how they can create solutions for their clients. So I'm happy to see that happening. And then, building on the point that Michael just made earlier, there's this new type of provider that we're seeing. And the new type of provider are, some of the most innovative solutions that I've seen have been from companies that had nothing to do with technology prior, right? I'm incredibly excited about an opportunity that we're working on with a construction company that has created a spin out that is a technology company to really change the way that we engage in that business. So there's this new type of providers, companies that are, incumbents or in certain industries that are evolving to be technology companies and realize that if they start collaborating outside of their industry, there's opportunities for them to do things like monetize data assets or specific knowledge of their industry. So the fun continues.
So I suppose, talking about the fun, as Stephen just mentioned there, can I just ask what technologies and solutions have piqued your interest perhaps over the last kind of couple of months or years? And if we got our crystal balls out in 5 or 10 years' time, what innovation do you think we'll be looking at as being at the forefront of insurance innovation? There's quite a lot to kind of go on there, but Angela, I'll start you off with this one.
Gosh, yes. And when you said this question, I thought, my gosh, there's so much. Like, how do you kind of narrow it down to just one thing that's piqued your interest, and what one thing in the future. And I'm probably going to sound a bit like a stuck record, but cloud is something that isn't brand new, but I think it's becoming more widely used throughout insurance. It's getting a bit more, people I think are feeling less wary of it, and certainly cloud first. I think I read, it was a Gartner statistic, I think they said about 2023, there'll be like 50% of medium to large companies using low code, for example, which is cloud-based predominantly. And since 2015 to 2019, the amount of insurers using more cloud-first approach is rapidly growing. So for me, that's kind of the thing that I'm finding most exciting. Certainly in RSA, we're looking more at cloud first and the opportunities it gives. You can be more flexible, you can be more scalable, you can be far more adaptive. We've seen that over the last 12 or so months, people have completely changed every aspect of their lives. And if we as businesses can't adapt in return to what's going on outside, then we're not going to be able to keep going for very long, or certainly struggle to. And cloud enables so much. If I think about the top three elements, should we say, that I'm focused on, digital, huge, modernization, huge as well, and I think it was Steve's point, it was Michael's point, sorry, on data. Cloud can enable so much in regards to all of those things. So for me, I find the most exciting, just because of what it can do in terms of improving customer experience, improving the entire journey, and just what it can do for the future. And then, yes, off the back, I think low code is going to become more and more prominent. It's certainly over the last couple of months, I've heard it talked about internally, certainly more and more and more, and hearing about it more widely outside as well. So those are my takeaways.
Michael.
Wow. Big question. I think for us, we have to have an eye to them, especially in the claim side of things, which is where I spend most of my time. We have to have an eye to the days where there aren't going to be any claims, or if there are any claims, they'll be heavily mitigated or, preemptively stopped or whatever. We've got to think about those types of technologies, and we've been looking a lot at that in terms of loss prevention, loss mitigation technologies. I think that, again, going back to what we were talking about, and with kind of a theme I think that's gone through this discussion is around, innovative business models within insurance, and the idea of selling a peril policy and then having a claim or not. Those days in the relatively short term, I think will shift as technology supports a completely different outcome for a policyholder. Combined with emergency assistance type support, as well as, subscription-based models that create a different outcome in an insurance. If you look at the insurance in terms of what the thing is that it's actually trying to solve for, it's that what happens when the worst happens. Well, what if we can make sure the worst doesn't happen? Do you still need insurance? And I think, so we're looking a lot at how do we support the insurance industry and our clients in that transition towards, a different way of mitigating, particularly in claims. We've got to look at as much about the claim, but also about prevention. So that's some of the stuff around smart home, Internet of Things. It's been around a long time. It's been around, but nobody's really managed to nail it down in terms of the value it can deliver. But that's starting to change, in my experience.
Stephen.
So what I look forward to in the next 5 to 10 years with technology is, forget about the new first, new things that'll be invented for a minute, but let's think about the existing things that we have that are going to evolve and how they come together to meet the needs of managing risk and evolving risks. We currently have significant gaps in our industry in the ability to provide cover or risk management for several types of risks. And, we haven't been able to grow the overall insurance market and what it covers in order to keep pace with all the other innovation and everything else that's happening in the world. So how do we create coverage for things like, intellectual property, continue to meet the needs of the changes that are happening in the cyber market, things like, reputation and other digital and other things that are amplified by digital. So one is how technology is applied to do that, and also how we go through the growing pains. So, I'm a believer in blockchain, and we could probably have hours of meetings on whether or not that's right or wrong. But, assume it is something that we can use and has value. Can we do it in an environmentally safe way, right? AI, I'm a big believer in AI and the power of AI to solve things for us. But can we do that in a socially responsible way without creating bias, without amplifying the divides that exist in our society? So I think there's going to be a big focus on how we do and manage the incredible amount of innovation and technology that we've created in recent years and deploy that in a responsible way, and also in a way that can truly meet the needs of growing the overall importance of our industry.
Finally, I come to you on this, James.
Sure. So I think you can look at the retail world outside of insurance, see how people behave and how they use technology, and that can often give you a bit of a clue as to what's coming down the line for the world of insurance. And customers more and more now expect everything they buy of value or significance to be connected in some way. So it'd be unusual to buy a new car now and not have that connected in some way, and your home's probably connected by your doorbell or your alarm or whatever else it might be. So I think customers will expect all insurance products of the future to be connected. And then linked to that, I think cyber insurance is going to become the most important insurance as we all become more and more plugged in, like the characters in the Matrix. And I'll just refer to Steve's point about blockchain. I mean, that's one of the things which I think people really struggle to understand, and therefore there's a tendency to say, oh, it's never going to happen, it's too complicated, or it doesn't work, or what's the real application of it? And now it's starting to see, obviously, the digital currency has emerged, and a few very small use cases where you can see the value of parametric insurance, and perhaps somewhere you can see value of securing and logging data and so on. But I think that's just going to creep forward, and we'll start to see some really good applications. So that's really exciting from my point of view.
So I suppose finally, really, is kind of I have to ask this question really, but obviously there are people watching this. How would you advise them to go about upgrading digitally and implementing the latest technology? What should they be considering from your experience as the best approach? Particularly, and this goes to some of the questions that's come up really, is there might be skepticism within your organization. I mean, you mentioned blockchain there, and these things that have been around or been talked about for a number of time. How do you overcome some of that skepticism? So I suppose really this is the advice to the people out there, and I'll come to you first of all, Michael.
Thanks again. Stephen mentioned this earlier, actually. Sponsorship's really important. So once you understand this, and then the strategy that supports the decision to do something and making sure that's visible to people, I think because ultimately those things get lost in the user base, right? Whether that user base is a policyholder, whether that user base is an internal user or a supplier or whatever. And I think for me, having a clear vision of why you're doing something is the thing that you've got to focus on. We also say data first at all times. So when you're making a decision about how you're going to deploy something, whether that you've got to bear in mind that data is going to be created through its use. That data is going to become valuable to you, right, over time. And so what often happens in the old days, and this is 10 plus years ago, when people are saying, what's our MI strategy for this piece of technology? MI strategy, that was the thing. Well, we need a data warehouse. Let's just send all the data over there. I think nowadays, what people realize is that often the value of something is demonstrated through its data, both in terms of the business context, but also long-term and strategically. So you can't prove that something's worth doing unless you can see the output of it, and that is data. So in my experience, as I say, data first at all times. Make sure that you've got the right sponsorship, you understand why you're doing something, and then that the data that you're creating through the deployment of whatever that thing is visible to those people who are making the decisions to do it or not, or to expand it or not, or to take it forward. Because closing that data loop is the only way to secure value from an initiative, in my experience. And I know that through deploying technology with a clear data strategy and without it, and the difference in the outcome is stark in my experience. So that would be my shortish answer.
Stephen.
Sure. So my advice, when I look back on some of the successes and some of the not successful things that we've done, my advice is to shrink the playing field. And by shrink the playing field, what I mean is we often enter into these opportunities thinking about, do we build something? Do we buy some technology? Or do we partner with somebody in order to deliver this opportunity? And really the right way to think about it is not build, buy, or partner. It's build, buy, and partner. Because what that allows you to do is shrink what is a very complicated, very difficult thing to execute with significant risks in that execution, and balance it across those external perspectives, ready-made capabilities, and allows you to choose on where you really want to take on execution risk and delivery. So shrink it down as much as you can through those external opportunities, and work hard at it.
James. Okay, so keep simple answer. I would just say understand your customer. The most important thing. And actually, Kodak did invent the digital camera in 1975, but they didn't understand that it's what their customers wanted. Sorry, Michael. So they invented it, but it was wasted. And what irony that is.
Finally, Angela.
Yeah, conscious of time, so I'll try and keep this brief. So my advice, assuming that you need the new thing and you can't use what's existing, I would say start small and build, and know how you're going to measure success. Because if you don't know how you're going to measure success, you'll never know whether or not you hit the mark ever.
Okay, well, as you've all mentioned, we have run out of time, unfortunately. So I'd like to say a big thank you to my panel of Angela, Michael, Stephen, and James. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank you all for watching, and I'd also like to thank our session sponsor, CoreLogic. This is the last session of Insurance Post 2021, the technology event. But I want to remind you, you can catch up with any of the sessions you missed on demand now, including our 2 Get the Edge talks today with Swiss Re and Howden Insurance Group. They're definitely worth watching, as are all the sessions from this conference. But until the next event, which is the Insurance Post Live Annual Conference on the 15th to 17th of June, it's goodbye from me. Cheerio, everybody.